Hello guys, welcome to another session. So here we will be discussing the question and answers. So I'll share one question and then we can look at the answer also. It's a direct, straightforward question. So write a note on, objectivity and value neutrality, highlight that difference. So guys, it's a very straightforward answer. Now, one thing that you need to understand is when you talk about objectivity, objectivity is a broader concept where there is a complete freedom from personal bias in investigation, right? When we talk about value neutrality, that can be related to the values that individual hold and that can affect the investigation. So value neutrality is basically one of the precondition for ensuring objectivity. I can explain how and why once again, because if you see, when we talk about objectivity, it's a broad concept. And what is the reason why objectivity is compromised? Because there can be some personal bias which can come in the investigation. That's how objectivity can be compromised. There are other reasons also where objectivity can be compromised that I'll discuss, but personal bias is one of the reasons. Now, why this personal bias is coming? Because of certain values that you hold. Now, what do you mean by values? These are the beliefs that you carry in your mind, right? So, and based on which you will evaluate, you tend to evaluate the situations. And these values are from religion. It could be from, region or language or caste or ethnicity, culture. It could be anything. So what my point is, if you want to be objective, you should remain value neutral. The values should not affect your investigation. So you need to be completely free from any personal bias. So for that, you need to be completely value neutral. So what is the difference now? Objectivity is a broad concept. To ensure objectivity, value neutrality is a must. So I would put it in this way, value neutrality is the precondition to achieve objectivity. But value neutrality alone, will that give you objectivity? No, there can be many other things also which can affect even data collection and then interpretation, all those areas there can be, the objectivity can be compromised and that we can again discuss into. So I hope you understood my point here. Now we can start with the introduction. So what all things you will be writing here? You can define objectivity, right? So when we talk about objectivity in sociology basically refers to unbiased representation of social phenomena, which is free from personal, cultural, or ideological biases. So objectivity basically demand that the sociologist approach their research with complete detachment that will ensure that their findings will actually reflect the empirical realities rather than the personal beliefs or preconceived notions or any such kind of things, okay? Now, what are the importance of objectivity in sociological research? It basically ensures sociology is recognized as a scientific discipline when you are aligning with the methodological rigor of natural science, right? So that's why objectivity is important. Otherwise, again, it will enhance the validity and reliability of sociological research, and that makes the findings universally applicable and acceptable. That's another importance. And you can also say it facilitate unbiased cross-cultural comparisons and interpretation. So for comparative studies also, it can be used if there is no, problem with objectivity, right? Otherwise, if it based on culture, if it changed based on region, if it changed based on ethnicity or religion, then you cannot replicate or you cannot go for a comparative analysis. We can talk about, various thinkers also, like Emile Durkheim advocated the study of social facts as things need to consider like objects, right? So he emphasized that the researchers must abandon any kind of personal bias. So he advocated to consider social facts as things. And in his study of suicide, he demonstrated the use of statistical method to establish sociology as a discipline. And it's a classical exhibition of the use of statistical techniques or scientific methods in sociology, objective study. Redcliffe Brown again promoted the idea of cultural relativism. He argued that the researchers should avoid, ethnocentric judgments when you are studying different societies. Auguste Comte, we talk about positivism. Again, that's one of the key principle of positivism is about theory building and objectivity, right? And you should only study or rely on observable empirical facts rather than any kind of subjective interpretation. Now, what are the challenges to achieve objectivity? You can talk about, from data collection to interpretation, right? So theory building, the perspective that you use in all these areas, data collection, suppose you're using interview method. So there can be interviewer bias, right? And then again, based on the interpretation, different perspective use based on that also, there can be subjectivity. So you can talk about Merton's perspective. You can give various examples like participant observation, non-participant observation, field constraints, etc. Andre Bethe, we can discuss. For example, when you talk about Merton, it says researchers' psychological leanings influence the topic of selection. So when you start selecting the topic, that itself may be based on subjectivity, right? That, ideological thing will be affected over there. For example, if you see Redcliffe, not Redcliffe, Redfield's functionalist perspective and Lewis Marxist viewpoint, that led to contrasting interpretation of Tepos clan community. Okay, then again, hypothesis formation. Hypothesis again reflect the prevailing ideologies or interest of the researcher. Then if you look at participant observation, the risk the nativism, where the researchers basically becomes overly identified with the group. Right? Again, non-participant observation, if you see, there is a risk in imposing external bias and assumptions. But if you're participating, that is again identified with the group. That statement that William White, a study of Italian criminals, we discussed many times in many situations, right? So he stated that I started as a non-participant observer, right? And then ended as a participant non-observer. Again, various field constraints. Andre Bethe experienced, and the societal structures, the caste hierarchies, it actually limit access to certain groups or areas, introducing that kind of partiality. There are criticisms which you can write, like Gunnar Myrdal and Donny Giddens, why they are saying absolute objectivity is not possible, illusion, non-attainable, etc. Weber also we can discuss, where according to Weber, absolute objectivity is neither possible nor desirable, because you're dealing with natural science is dealing with natural science which do not have any consciousness, where the behavior can be predicted easily in terms of cause and effect. But sociology dealing with human beings who have consciousness, and the behavior cannot be predicted easily in terms of cause and effect. So absolute objectivity cannot be, achieved or possible, neither desirable. Gunnar Myrdal argued that the total objectivity is an illusion. Moral values, cultural upbringing, and the societal context that makes absolute objectivity unattainable. All these will affect the research. Anthony Giddens also highlighted that the structure, that the objective factors and the agency, which is a subjective behavior, both are interlinked, and that makes purely objective research it's difficult or not possible. Then when you talk about value neutrality, that can be achieved. Objectivity, it's difficult because of the inherent problems and so many things that you need to concentrate on. Value neutrality with the proper training, with the proper method, abstaining from your personal beliefs and values, you can in fact ensure. So value neutrality is a small factor. Objectivity is a broad aspect. Value neutrality must be there to ensure objectivity. If value neutrality is not maintained, that itself is going to compromise objectivity, because personal bias will come. So value neutrality, if you see, this is actually a concept introduced by Max Weber, and he emphasizes the ethical obligation of sociologists to remain detached from their personal values, ensuring that these values will not influence the research process or its outcome. So what is Weber's proposition, right? Weber actually talk about this: researchers must consciously acknowledge their biases, their values. Like if you are a female, that bias towards female when you're studying any issues related to that, right? Or if you're from a particular religion, that bias. If you're from a particular community, that bias. Or from region, that bias, right? So that their bias you need to acknowledge. That will prevent them from distorting the research findings. Fact and values should be kept separate. So sociologists should refrain from making value judgments. Things should be based on facts. Values should not be there. Values should not affect the facts. Every judgment should be based on the facts. So that's when you will establish the cause and effect relation. C. Wright Mills and Alvin Goldner, they criticize value neutrality as passive stance. They argued that the sociologists must engage with humanistic values and contribute to social reform. And then if you look at the contemporary realization, modern sociologists and most sociologists now accept that complete value neutrality is unrealistic, but strive to minimize biases through transparency. If you want to, you can achieve value neutrality. Absolute objectivity, when you talk about, that's impossible. That's neither desirable, that's not possible also. But you try to ensure objectivity by following proper methods and everything. That's the best you can do. Again, how can you achieve value neutrality, or again objectivity, or value neutrality to most extent? Objectivity, there are constraints, right? Achieving objectivity is difficult. Value neutrality is possible. Reflexivity. So sociologists must critically evaluate their own biases and disclose them to, during the research purpose. Then you can go for organized skepticism. That's a peer review, right? Organizing the criticism, that is through the peer evaluation that can help you to identify and mitigate the subjective influences. That's another way. Then methodological pluralism, triangulation. So Weber is talking about that. You combine the quantitative, qualitative methods or other methods. That's what you mean by triangulation. That will reduce the risk of bias. Then cultural relativism. You can adopt this approach, right? That will ensure that the researchers evaluate the cultural practices within their own context. That will again reduce the ethnocentric bias. Now, if you look at the difference, since the question is asked on difference between objectivity and value neutrality, you can discuss that in terms of 4 dimensions. You can talk about in terms of definition, the difference, focus of both, achievability in terms of both, examples in terms of both. So if you want, you can make a table. If you look at the definition, when we talk about objectivity, that's an unbiased representation of data and finding. It's difficult. On the other side, value neutrality is ethical commitment to minimize personal biases. It is possible, it's at your personal level. It can be achieved. Here, if you see the focus on objectivity, that's the research process and methodology, right? Here, it is the researcher's attitude and ethical stance he take, whether he remain value neutral or not, right? So he is completely detached from his values or not. Achievability, if you see, it's difficult to achieve due to inherent biases when we talk about objectivity. But value neutrality is achievable with conscious effort and reflexivity and the other methods which we discussed. If you talk about examples, objectivity, you can talk about example, Durkheim's study of suicide using statistical method. There is an approach, that was a classical exhibition of use of statistical techniques, scientific methods and everything, but still there is a question of objectivity over there. The data which he collected and everything is a question. Right. On the other side, you can talk about Weber's approach of separating facts from values to attain value neutrality. See, again, guys, you can talk about different sociological perspective. You can add interpretive perspective. You can talk about positivist approach. You can talk about critical perspective. You can talk about phenomenology, ethnomethodology, etc. So positivism, objective understanding of objective reality. Non-positivism, subjective understanding of subjective reality. In between Weber and Mead, objective understanding of subjective reality. So here again, some favor objectivity, some favor subjectivity. Or the positivist and Weber Mead, they favor objectivity. Only the subject matter differ between them. But when it comes to non-positivist, there is no objectivity. Complete understanding and subjective understanding of society is what they're looking at. Right? So if you look at positivists, they advocate for strict adherence to scientific methods and objectivity. Durkheim emphasized on treating social facts as objects, things, as empirical realities. Why? To ensure objectivity. Weber, if you look at interpretive perspective, he emphasized on, this worst hand, and he's also talking about separating fact and value to maintain that value neutrality. And he again highlighted the subjective meaning of social actions also. Right? If you look at critical perspectives like, Karl Marx, yeah, you can say value neutrality is not desirable. Research should expose the exploitation and contribute to societal change. Alvin Goldner emphasized that sociology must actively engage with social justice issues. So different perspectives, different sociologists, different stance on objectivity, subjectivity. But the question is about objectivity and value neutrality. The difference is clear. Their achievability is clear. Their definition is clear. I hope you got the understanding. Many people mistakenly believe that both are the same. So that's the area you actually make the mistake. But now it is very clear what is objectivity, what is value neutrality. Objectivity is a broad term which is difficult to achieve, neither desirable nor possible. But we try to ensure that value neutrality is something which is achievable because this is within the researcher hand. Okay, so objectivity and value neutrality, if you see, both are foundational to sociological inquiry that will ensure that scientific rigor and that ethical integrity in the subject. Achieving absolute objectivity is not possible, right? Not desirable also. It's unattainable due to inherent biases and societal influences. But striving for transparency and reflexivity is essential. Means value neutrality is possible. It's essential also. Okay, right? So value neutrality, I'm not talking about it. See, it doesn't mean ignoring values. Rather, you are acknowledging and minimizing their impact on research. I'm not saying you are ignoring religion. I'm not saying you are ignoring region or culture or anything. You acknowledge that and you minimize their impact in your research. So together, these principles contribute to the credibility, reliability, and transformative potential of sociological studies. So that's how you will be writing this answer. So that's about this session, guys. I hope it helped you in one or the other way to update your notes, to add more points. So if you like the video, share it with your friends. And if you're looking for any mentorship on sociology, test series, or the classes, get in touch with us. Details are given in the description. Check out that. So see you in the next session. Thank you so much.